What's going on, everyone? Chris here with Clutter Reduction Junk Removal, and today we are doing a job for a house that is looking to be sold soon. I got the job through the professional organizer and her husband, who is also a realtor, and their daughter is a realtor as well, so a little triple threat there. But they said it's just a lot of big ass pieces is what they said, but it is a first floor. They think I can handle it because they've seen me work before, so we are here solo. And someone asked the other day if coming to the jobs, if I ever feel less professional being a solo worker. And I've given this spiel a few times, but I found it to be helpful to just let people know, like, the way I operate my business is I determine if it's going to be a 1 or a 2-man job. It seems to be the norm that a lot of people have 2, but as a professional former mover, and all the people who use me are former movers, it's a lot of stuff that we can get done ourselves just using proper technique and execution. So I use that as kind of my spiel to defend myself. And they're not that's not entirely a lie either. I do a lot of this stuff because I can. It's just a good way to keep overhead low so that I can push for that growth sooner. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys a job and then we'll get started. Alright, so that job is complete. It took a little over 2 hours, but they bought me lunch, so I'm just gonna kind of keep it at 2 hours. Normally, I would charge an additional hour or so for the disassembly of that large entertainment center for the office, and then I was also messing around with some stuff in the garage. But the organizer and the realtor and the daughter, I do a lot of work for, and me and my girlfriend even go and have dinner with them outside of work. So I'm not super stignant when it comes to certain things. It's kind of like one of the situations where it's like, when it's a real like repeat client, you're a little bit more lenient about like those extra surcharges. If it was like a clean out or something, then I would charge accordingly. But for things like this, it's not a big deal. It's a lot of downtime in between because there's a lot of decision making going on. So overall, not too bad of a job. Not a whole lot to really be able to donate or scrap. Just a couple of bags of clothes in the back, really. Otherwise, everything else is kind of outdated or too big for a donation. And we talked about this in the last video. Donation is not working out super well lately. So that's pretty much it. We're gonna go and drop all this off, and then we have to go take care of a small pickup. I mentioned before in the video that when people ask, like, oh, like you're here alone. Lately, I've just been telling people, like, you know, the way I operate my business is I do 1 to 2 man crews depending on the job, because in reality, if you know what you're doing, you don't really need 2 people for the majority of your work, at least in my experience. And the people I use are all former movers. So that's kind of what I've been telling people, and it's really helped with answering that question. And then afterwards, like once they see you move one piece, they're pretty like quiet about stuff. They're not gonna say like, are you gonna be able to move that one? Are you gonna be able to move that? Are you gonna be able to move that? Like they get quiet pretty quick once you move a big piece. So that's one thing that I've been able to really push off as far as question wise. And then there's another thing that I get asked a lot, but we'll talk about that when we get to the next destination because it looks like it's about to rain. All right, we just got back. The second job we did was just a quick little thing. I was just bringing around a broken mailbox and some debris from someone's backyard to the curb. They live in my neighborhood, so I just charged them a 1 hour minimum labor, which is like 40 or 50 bucks. Took me like 20 minutes. The second question I get sometimes, not as often, but I do sometimes get it, and I think it's good to try to learn how to respond to certain questions without coming off as rude. But the second question following the, oh, you're here by yourself is, hey, is it the same price or is it cheaper because it's just you? Now, I personally have always accepted this as a passive aggressive question because of a couple of experiences I've had in the past, but I do try to react to them as if it's just a genuine question and they're just asking because they don't know, in which case I always reply with, yes, it is the same price because you were paying for the service, not for how many people I have. And most people are like, okay. I've only had one person argue with me about it, and it was back when I was in my first year and a half when I was still working part-time as a mover. And it's also when I had the U-Haul trucks too. I didn't have a truck and trailer yet. So yes, I came off as less professional. But it's when I first started. Like I just didn't have the funds for it. I was working my way up. I had this one guy where, by the way, the video is basically over here, but if you want to listen to the story, it's probably going to take another minute or two. So thank you for watching. If you're going to cut out here, if you want to stay tuned, fun times. So I had a guy who I did a job for with the moving company, and they allowed me to solicit myself at the moving company because they didn't have junk removal affiliated. And he basically moved everything but a sectional couch that he was going to throw away. And he was going to call a certain company that I'm familiar with. And I was like, hey, I have a junk removal business. I kind of started up this year. I can come by this weekend and grab it. And I told him my price, and he was like, cool, I'm going to give the other guys a call and just make sure they're not, more expensive or cheaper. And this guy had money, And he ended up, and I knew the company he was going to call, and I already knew my prices were cheaper. And he ended up calling me the next day. He's like, hey, I reached out and I called out a company and you came in like 200 bucks cheaper. And I was like, yes. And it was a 9-piece sectional couch, not recliners, thankfully, but it was a bulkier 9-piece sectional couch. He had a big house. It was huge. It wrapped up like half his living room. And I quoted him for 3/4 of a truck. Now, keep in mind, this is when I used the 15-foot U-Hauls. So 3/4 of a U-Haul for a 15-foot truck is like a truck and a quarter of my trailer. So my prices back then were pretty cheap if you really think about the cubic footage. So I told him it's going to be about 3/4 of a truck, and this was my price. And he was like, cool, sounds good. I showed up that weekend, and he was like looking around. He's like, where's the other guy at? And I said, there is no other guy. It's just me. I've run a lot of these jobs solo. And he was like, oh, well, are you going to be able to do this? Which is kind of annoying because every time I've done a move for somebody, like they already watch us bring down like huge dressers and carry out mattresses and stuff by ourselves and bringing dressers downstairs with a dolly with no problem. So it's like, you obviously know I can do this. But he asked anyways. He's like, oh, are you going to be able to do this by yourself? And I was like, yes. I was here. I know what your couch looks like. And I went and each piece, slapped it on a dolly, rode it right out the door. A couple pieces you had to sit there and kind of hook out the door, no problem. I think I was done in like, it was like 13 or 14 minutes because he ended up texting me later. He didn't leave me a bad review, luckily, but it was like 13 or 14 minutes to get the job done. And at the end, I told him, all right, it's going to be that 3/4 price. And, you know, it is what it is. And he was like, oh, I thought it was going to be cheaper because it's just you here. And I was like, no, you're paying for the service, not how many people it is. If we were the moving company and I had a 3-man crew versus a 2-man crew that we had with you yesterday, you'd be paying more. But there's no discount for less people. I'm just taking on more of the work. And he like wasn't, you could tell he wasn't happy about that. And then he was like, he looked at his phone. He was like, that took you less than 15 minutes. Like, you can't give me a discount for that? And I was like, no, because you're paying for the service, not how much time it takes. And he was just giving me a hard time about it. And then towards the end, he paid and everything was fine. But then he texted me later and he said, hey, sorry for being an ass. I just thought it wasn't fair that you were able to do that so quickly and by yourself, and that I was getting charged as if there was 2 people, because that's what the other company told me would happen, that they would be sending out 2 guys and that was going to be this price. And I was like, I completely understand your viewpoint. I just am capable of doing it as being a mover, and I run my business solo if I can, so I can help build my profit and grow more in the future. And I was almost wanting to tell him, you also paid $200 less by using me. But long story short, never heard from him again. He didn't leave a bad review, not that he should have. But it was one of those situations where it was like, you start getting worried. It's like, are you going to pay me, or am I going to have to do like a small claims court here? I wouldn't do small claims for that amount of money. But it was one of those situations. So I just learned that the best way to handle them is to just treat it as a genuine question or concern. And you just talk to them and explain your reasoning and just try to sound as professional as possible in the process so they don't think that you're just bullshitting them. Because I think that's how a lot of people feel with certain services. Keep in mind, the majority of the country in the world don't want to pay for us to remove stuff that they have no value for anymore. All right? I talked about this in one of those shorts where to stick to your gut when you're giving quotes, because people will say, why the hell do I have to pay you $150 to remove a couch that I don't want anymore? Just because they don't have value to it anymore. They don't want to pay to get rid of it. But they're not just paying for me to load it up in my truck and go dump it for $20. They're paying for the cost of me having to come out to their house, which takes travel time, truck maintenance to get out there, take the labor and the equipment and the knowledge and the skills to load it up, take it out, maybe try to donate it, and then go disposal. Like, that cost is paying for the whole business, not just what it costs to load up a couch and go dump it off somewhere. So I just always try to, make sure they understand the business operation. The people who understand the business are going to be the ones that complain about your price for what you're doing. It's the ones that don't want to pay for something that are forced to, which is what junk removal is. Junk removal is either a convenience or a last case scenario. That's literally what the industry is meant for, right? If you have a hoarder house, you're not going to get 5 guys, your buddies, and give them a couple of beers and order pizza and say, hey guys, help me bag up all this crap with all these roaches everywhere and then go chuck it out at the curb. 1, the city's not going to take it. 2, pretty good chance your buddies aren't going to do that for a couple of beers, so you're probably going to have to pay them. And then at that point, you're going to have to probably get a rental truck so you can bring all the crap to the dump. Like, it's a convenience at that point. Or let's say you're in a 3rd-story apartment and you have all this massive furniture that it has to be out tomorrow morning because you have your move-in date or move-out date, and you can't get it down yourself because you're just not capable. You don't know any of your neighbors. So you have to call a junk removal company and say, hey, I need you guys to come take all this furniture out as soon as possible. So it's convenience or it's worst-case scenario. So I just always try to make sure that I am explaining my operations, the reasoning behind them. This is the service you're paying for. That's it. So that's my long little rant. If you stuck around, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys later on in the week. Bye.